I think the first step is action. It's the step that creates the momentum to unravel and create opportunities for yourself. I think when we don't take the first step, obviously nothing changes. No opportunities present themselves. No forward motion or movement or progress happens. And so I think the hardest step is going from this idea phase to action. And sometimes it just takes courage. And people always say courage is not, it's not that the absence of fear, right? It's taking action in the face of fear. And so I really encourage people to just take the first step. What is the first small step that I could take to make progress towards my goal? It doesn't have to be a lofty one, because then that could get too overwhelming. What are 1 to 3 things that I could do today or in the next week to help me move towards my goal? And let's take action there.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the show. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Luvleen Sidhu, and we've got a great conversation ahead of us. At just 28 years old, Luvleen co-founded Bank Mobile, which in just over 4 years has become one of America's largest and fastest growing digital banks, and now serves as their president and chief strategy officer. Under Luvleen's leadership, Bank Mobile's executive team created a disruptive multi-partner distribution model known as Bank as a Service, which enables Bank Mobile to acquire customers at a higher volume and substantially lower expenses than traditional banks. Today, their platform provides services to colleges and universities, serving more than 5 million students on nearly 800 campuses nationwide. And through this distribution channel, they're serving 1 in every 3 college students in the country, which is absolutely mind-boggling. The company has also expanded its bank-as-a-service strategy, most recently with T-Mobile for the launch of T-Mobile Money, a mobile-first checking account. So Luvleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to jump into your story, learn more about how you started this company and how the company is seeing such explosive growth. We have a lot of entrepreneurial-minded individuals listening, so I know they're going to be fascinated just at how you were able to have such massive success. So just to kind of kick things off, I'd love to understand a little bit more about you and your background and what got you interested in going down this route of entrepreneurship.
Sure, we'd be happy to. So I grew up in a banking family, to be honest. My father was in banking, and I never thought that I would be a banker. It was probably the last thing on my list. I was signed up to be a doctor. I went to Harvard undergrad, and I found my pre-med courses to be so difficult. And I realized that my passion really wasn't there. And there could, my driving sort of motivation was, hey, I want to be in a profession that really helps people. There's contribution and giving really at the centerpiece of what I'm doing. And I realized in college that medicine is not the only vehicle for doing that, but entrepreneurship is as well. And so I did my first finance internship at Lehman Brothers. And that's how I got into finance. And I spent my sophomore summer there, my junior summer there, went full-time after I graduated. My first day on the job was the Lehman bankruptcy. So that was a very interesting start of my career.
Wow.
But it really opened my eyes to the fragility of the American financial system and how many people suffered from that recession and what happened as part of that broader sort of Lehman story. It was a much bigger macro picture of what was happening to millions of Americans financially. And so, coming from a banking family, living through that financial sort of crisis, and then later going to business school and taking courses on entrepreneurship and seeing my classmates launch businesses and reading case studies on so many businesses being launched to solve consumer pain points and successfully doing that, all contributed to having this sort of entrepreneurial bug that developed and brought me where I am today.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very, very cool journey. And so is Bank Mobile your first entrepreneurial venture then?
It is, yes. So I was very traditional before that. Went to undergrad and went to an investment bank, which was Lehman, and became Neuberger Berman, worked in their hedge fund of funds group on the investing side, and applied to business school, did the 2 years there, did consulting after that. So very much a straight arrow, sort of what many people that went to undergrad with me did, investment banking or consulting and then business school. But it was really after business school where I said, hey, there's a different path for me. I'm excited to take the leap at this point. I see an opportunity, and that's where I really changed the trajectory and entered into entrepreneurship.
So let's talk about that opportunity that you saw a little bit. What was your inspiration to start the company? Where were you, or how did you recognize that there was a gap in the market and that you had an idea that might be able to fill that gap?
Sure. So I actually remember opening my first bank account, and that was when I went into college. And I remember walking into the branch and it taking, close to 15, 20 minutes to open that account. And I remember leaving pretty much uninspired by the experience. I don't think anything left me with like a great taste in my mouth. Like, that was a wonderful customer experience. I feel like my bank is my partner. I feel like they can really help me have a solid financial foundation and grow in my life. And that's the sort of partnership and that's the sort of experience I wanted as, an 18-year-old sort of college student. So I think remembering that was a huge sort of motivator for me when I started Bank Mobile. And then two, going to business school and realizing that, entrepreneurship, the secret of it is really understanding what is the consumer pain point that you're solving for and making sure that there really is a problem that you're solving for. And if you look at the stats in the U.S., a third of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Almost 50% of Americans don't have enough to pay for a $400 emergency if that happens. Yet these same Americans are being charged $34 billion a year in just overdraft fees by the big banks. And that's really to be able to subsidize their overhead costs. And so I knew that from an affordability standpoint, there was a huge customer experience need that wasn't being met by banks. And then also from just a broader experience where consumers are now entering a bank branch one time a year on average versus interacting with their bank on a mobile device 20 to 30 times a month. And so there's a huge difference in the way people are interacting with their bank. And I don't believe that banks were responding and really to the needs and the challenges of the consumer. And so I found that there was a huge opportunity to take a very antiquated industry, bring it to the 21st century, and really help consumers in the process.
So that makes total sense. Where then you see this opportunity, recognize from your perspective that there's this giant antiquated industry and there's an opportunity there to really revolutionize it and connect with consumers in a more meaningful way and provide a better service. Where do you get started then? Like, what were those early days like when you went from an idea to starting to take action on making this an actual business? Yep.
So I really believed from day one that there was a lot of benefit to not just being a fintech company delivering banking services, but to actually have the bank charter, the FDIC insurance, and from a business model front, to really have access to low-cost deposits for funding, which a bank charter provides for you. And so starting your own bank and getting that bank charter is very costly, and it's a very long process. So the first step I took was identifying how can I get into the banking business without having to go through the process of becoming a bank myself. And so I took the stance of let's see who I can partner with. And so today we partner with a bank called Customers Bank, which is a Pennsylvania-based community bank that really focuses on small businesses. And they didn't have a retail arm. And I approached them and we utilize today their bank charter to get all the benefits of the bank charter, but they've also given us the autonomy to be fully digital and to pave our own vision and mission and develop Bank Mobile as it is today.
Oh, that's such a smart approach where you can leverage the industry knowledge of somebody else and having those things like a bank charter, but then be able to still go about and have your own impact, create your own business around it. So
exactly.
I love that approach. What factors do you think contributed to your success early on that allowed you to grow as rapidly as you guys have been able to do?
Sure. So, one thing I want to point out is that it's easy to look from the outside and be like, oh, wow, this company is growing exponentially. They had no hiccups along the way. They just knew everything to do at the right time, and that's what led to their growth. And the reality is, from my experience for myself and entrepreneurs that I've had the chance to speak to, is that you always have to pivot, and you don't always land up taking the path that you set out to do. You should always have a direction and a goal that you're going. But the reason I say this is, hey, we're a top 15 bank in terms of number of consumer checking accounts in less than 5 years. But we had to pivot our model to respond to what wasn't working and not give up in those moments to get where we are today. So, for example, in our first year, we had solely a direct-to-consumer strategy where we went out, we tried to convince people to switch to our bank because of all the benefits that we offer and trying to solve all the pain points that we thought consumers were experiencing. And we grew rather rapidly. We had about 100,000 accounts in year one. And for banks, that sort of acquisition is very good. But the reality is we were attracting a lot of smaller balance customers. We also experienced some fraud as well, as people were trying to take advantage, of a newcomer in the banking industry. And so the consumers that we ended up attracting, weren't that profitable to us. But we still wanted to stick by our vision and mission of providing a more affordable, more transparent, tech-driven banking solution. And we wanted to be able to grow rapidly and be profitable over time as well. So it was in that moment that we had to decide, where do we go from now? And what we as a management team decided in that moment was, how about we don't just do direct consumer, but we think there's an opportunity for a B2B2C play here in banking. And what I mean by that is maybe traditional banks can be thought of as B2B2C in the sense it's bank to bank, branch to consumer, which I think is a very inefficient model in the tech-driven era that we're in. The B2B2C that I'm talking about is maybe that you could go from the bank to a business partner to their consumers and offer banking services. And it's a way to get high volume customer acquisition at relatively low cost. And so we decided to do this first in the higher education space, where we now have contracts with 800 campuses across the country. And 1 in every 3 college-bound students goes to one of those schools. And so and we help solve a pain point for them. And in return, these students receive payments from the school. They can ACH this to an existing bank account or open a bank mobile account. And it has become a huge customer acquisition channel for us. So that's one way we've been able to grow exponentially. And we have continued that partnership model in the telecom space now through our partnership with T-Mobile.
Wow. So that B2B2C strategy is really that banking as a service concept that I explained in the intro, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. I
think
we're... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that go ahead.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I love that approach because it's so different from what you see in traditional banking models. And that's probably where it's been so successful, is you've been able to find a route that others have ignored and that other companies may not have seen because they've done things the same way for so long that they weren't willing or able to go ahead and take this new approach.
Yes. And that's what, I was trying to point out, that hey, sometimes things don't work out as you envision them to, but it's really about pivoting and building an organization that's flexible enough to pivot when new opportunities come, and have a management team that sort of has the vision behind being open-minded enough to even see opportunities where they might be.
So with that pivot to this banking as a service model, do you still do the direct-to-consumer business, or is it mainly focused on this piece of it now?
So we actually shut off our direct-to-consumer piece temporarily as we were solidifying the strong foundation for B2B2C, but we plan on opening that back up in the fall of this year. So coming soon, and that product is going to be called Bank Mobile Vibe Up.
I love it. So let's talk a little bit about mindset. So obviously this required a lot of changes. You had to be willing to pivot. and even coming into this industry and being able to be a disruptor in such a large industry that has big players who have big pockets and have been around for a long time, I'm sure that you have to have a large vision, but also a pretty ironclad mindset that you're going to be able to take this on. So what was your mindset going into this, and maybe how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, I think that people often sort of become a little complacent, and they sort of make the assumption that if there's bigger players that exist today and they have, potentially billions of dollars to invest, especially in technology, if that's the direction of the company or idea that you have, you just sort of make the assumption that how can you do it better? But I think what I've realized is that it's not about the number of dollars that you have, because there's plenty of banks that have billions of dollars to pour into technology each year. There's also sort of challenger banks or fintech companies as well that get billions of dollars of funding from VCs. But it's really less about the dollars and more about the strategy and about the execution. And so we really focus on constantly being very clear about what is our overall vision and mission, what are the goals and tactics that we need to achieve as part of that broader vision and mission. And then making sure that the entire management team, leadership team, as well as all the teams that work with them are constantly made aware and communicated of the vision, mission, goals, and the strategy. So everyone's aligned and working in the same direction.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And so when you talk about getting aligned and moving in the same direction from a leadership perspective, how have you gone about inspiring that alignment?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we have a New York office, we have a New Haven office, we have a Radnor office where our tech team is outside of Philadelphia, and then we have a very small office in Lancaster, PA, with our design and UX team. So I think that communication is key, and you have to be visible and present. So I spend a lot of time making sure that I'm visiting all of our offices, because unless you have that face-to-face opportunity to communicate, even though we live in a digital world and everyone's moving towards remote working, etc., there has to be opportunities for face-to-face communication to make sure that you can translate and convey the vision and the goals and make sure that everyone's aligned. So I invest a lot of my time in doing that.
So we talked a little bit about having to pivot, running into some challenges early on, and after that first year and needing to go a different direction. But I know that there were probably a handful of hiccups and challenges and failures that you've run into throughout your entrepreneurial journey. And I would love if you would be able to share maybe another story of a time that you ran into a situation that might be perceived as a failure from the outside, but looking back on it, you realize that that's actually springboarded you into success, either in that situation or in another future endeavor. I would love if you might just be able to shed some light on how you've handled a failure in the past.
Yeah, I mean, the one that keeps coming to mind is the failure, you could say, in direct-to-consumer, because it was my original sort of goal and desire that we could create a consumer brand out of banking. I really felt so much passion about direct-to-consumer, where I could touch, feel, and understand the consumer and respond to those needs. And it was actually very hard for me to pivot to a B2B2C model from a business front, because I think the opportunity is much greater there. And so looking back, I viewed it as a failure, where it's like, hey, this is what was my passion, and this is what was driving me to really reach the consumer directly, help with financial education, financial coaching, very grassroots sort of approach to delivering a consumer brand around banking. And I feel that I failed in that. And if you see some of our competitors coming in from Europe, especially, number 26, Revolut, Monzo, they all started around the same time as we started Bank Mobile. And, I hear sort of their numbers over time saying, hey, today we have 2 million customers, and some of them have 1 million to 2 million, to some of them have 3 million. And it's easy to sort of look at others and be like, oh, how did they create a consumer brand out of banking? And maybe we did it. And that was my initial sort of vision and mission. So there is a little tinge in my heart when I think about it, to be very honest. But then I was like, hey, look at this new opportunity that presented itself. Look how fortunate we are. We won an RFP with T-Mobile, one of the biggest brands in the world. And we get to deliver and partner and learn from them to be able to even build a better white label or banking as a service product for other partners. And it opened my eyes to the opportunity where there's so many non-banks, amazing brands and companies out there that are looking for ways to continue to attract, engage, and retain customers. And many of their customers are underserved in their banking needs. And now we have a solution where we can partner with them, help them strengthen their brand equity, strengthen their brand loyalty, and provide an additional service to help with attracting, engaging, and retaining customers. And look at the new opportunity that we've opened for ourselves.
Right. Yeah. And that I appreciate you sharing that perspective and sort of the emotions that go into that pivot too. And I think that that's a tough thing for a lot of entrepreneurs to do, is to recognize that, this grand idea that they had their heart set on isn't the direction that's working right now, at least. And I think that's an important part of it too, because obviously you guys are coming back to the direct to consumer piece. So that's it's not out of the picture. But being able to put that aside and look at it from the lens of, okay, how can we be successful here now so that we can go on and continue to serve that original mission that we had in place, and how can we do it in a way that we still stay true to ourselves? And so I think it's inspirational how you were able to do that. And I think that's a great reflection that you shared.
Thank you.
I would love also to help aspiring entrepreneurs who might be listening to this, if there's any advice that you might have for somebody who's thinking about taking this jump into entrepreneurship, thinking about, getting started on an idea that they have, but hasn't really taken action yet.
I think the first step is action. It's the step that creates the momentum to unravel and create opportunities for yourself. I think when we don't take the first step, obviously nothing changes. No opportunities present themselves. No forward motion or movement or progress happens. And so I think the hardest step is going from this idea phase to action. And sometimes it just takes courage. And people always say courage is it's not that the absence of fear, right? It's taking action in the face of fear. And so I really encourage people to just take the first step. What is the first small step that I could take to make progress towards my goal? It doesn't have to be a lofty one, because then that could get too overwhelming. What are 1 to 3 things that I could do today or in the next week to help me move towards my goal? And let's take action there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, because, it seems so daunting oftentimes to get started, and just being able to identify those first few steps, like you said, starts to build the momentum, starts to get the ball rolling. And that action begets action is something that I like to say, is that once you get that momentum going, it's easy to figure out, okay, what comes next? All right, where do we have to go from here? And really that's where you need to begin to be able to build up that momentum to carry you into the ultimate success that you desire to achieve.
Exactly.
Another perspective I would love to get is, if you could hop in a time machine and go back and talk to yourself back when you're 28 years old, you're thinking about this idea, but you hadn't really started it yet. Is there any advice that you would give to yourself at that point in the journey, now knowing everything that you've learned over the last few years?
Yeah, I think with my sort of formal education, like I went to Harvard undergrad, I went to Wharton Business School, and I think that I was sort of always taught, especially at Wharton, it was like, hey, in my entrepreneurship class, it was like, have a very clear idea. What pain point are you solving? Make sure you analyze the market opportunity, the competitive landscape. Make sure that you're completely unique. No one's doing what you're doing. et cetera, et cetera. And it had to be such a well thought out plan. And I think that is important. I'm not saying don't be thoughtful. You have to make sure that there is a compelling opportunity here. But I also felt that it created so much fear and inaction that, hey, it isn't comprehensive enough. Maybe this isn't the most unique thing that ever existed. Maybe there are competitors out there. Does that mean that I shouldn't do it? And I think it was just too formalized of a process rather than sort of taking some leaps and understanding that, there is an opportunity here, and it doesn't have to look like a perfect opportunity from day one. And you're going to figure out along the way how to pivot and how to make it the best opportunity for yourself. And so looking back, I think that I would not let sort of this formalized education that I've had, or this formal sort of process where everything has to look perfect before I take action, to stop me. I think it created fear for too long, and sort of played into what we were just talking about being able to take that first step.
That's a great call out, because oftentimes you can't see the full picture until you're really in it too. So you may think you know what the idea is. You may spend 2 years building out a business plan and identifying every player in the field and all these different things. And then until you actually are in it, you don't fully understand what challenges you're going to face, what opportunities may be there. For example, the banking as a service. So you're spot on with that advice to yourself, and everybody can learn from that. So Luvleen, I've been loving this conversation, and I'm sure that the listeners are too. Is there anywhere you might point them if they want to learn more about you, more about Bank Mobile, just to continue the conversation or to learn more about the brand that you've built?
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And you can learn more about Bank Mobile at bankmobile.com. And happy to stay in touch with me. I have a website called LuvleenSidhu.com, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and feel free to reach out to me. I love mentoring. I've been so inspired by so many people. And so please, I'd love to inspire people myself and sort of pay that forward. So you can always reach me at Bank Mobile, Sidhu at bankmobile.com as well.
Awesome. And I encourage people to go onto your website and check out your love notes, which is, I'm always a fan of a pun, but I read through some of those, and you just leave some inspiring and insightful words of wisdom on there. So everybody should go check those out at the very least.
Awesome. Would love that.
Thank you so much, Luvleen, for joining us here today. This was a super cool conversation. It's very, very interesting to see what you've been able to build and what you've learned along the way. So we really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, would you mind doing me an enormous favor? Could you drop a quick rating or review right there in your Apple Podcasts app on your phone? It helps so much in growing the show and helping more people find it. And when more